I was going to say that there are some sources coming out now. Dave Sershay is right there in the audience. He's done 2 books, one on graphic novels for children and one on graphic novels for adults. So there are some source lists out there. I myself am now the graphic novel specialist for Brodart. So Brodart is putting out monthly graphic novel lists, and I'm not getting you, John.
Oh no, I was pointing to Gorman because she had a pretty good book come out a little while ago.
Yeah, and yeah. Michelle, are you writing another?
Oh, and no, I'm done writing. I've written enough. I'm good.
Well, she's done some great resources, and there was a great one on graphic novels for kids also, and doing all kinds of lists. And Robin. Oh yeah, but we are starting to see more selection, more sources being made for the other audiences other than just teens. But yeah, it's still a process that has to continue. We're seeing Library Journal Booksmack is putting out some great lists. Martha Cornock does a lot of those. So it's growing. But I'm hoping that there will be more support for other lists from Alice, Caruso, whoever else, that they would, take this ball and start rolling with it and doing more. The crossover is definitely there on both ends of the spectrum that I think all of us are seeing as we work in our libraries, or I work in a school library now, but you definitely see that. And growing interest in all audience ranges for graphic novels. So there's definitely a need for more and more and more sources and lists to highlight the best. I find it interesting that when the great graphic novels for teens list get announced, the comics publishers have started taking that and doing their own PR for their books that have made the list, and they're getting it out to the comics industry and to the comics world. And then you have a lot of these adult fanboys who are like, what do you mean they selected that? So we are generating discussion out there, not just in the library world, which is, I think, really neat.
Sorry, I just wanted to add
that the Big Fat Commission report, I couldn't get through it. When Hill and Wang came out with the graphic novel version of it, it was amazing. And that made people able to read and comprehend what was in that report. And then to continue another trend, we touched a little bit on it with the graphic novel adaptations of classics and other literature. My son is a case in point. He's 15 years old. He's a great reader, but you know what? He does not like to read prose, and he does not like to read novels. He's a nonfiction guy. But when, again, Hill and Wang put out Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 in a graphic novel adaptation, and that was authorized by Ray Bradbury, I gave that to him last summer and said, please read this and see if you like it, because I knew I could not hand him the novel. He came back to me the next day after having finished it, and he was just boiling over with questions and just passionately asking all kinds of questions, exactly the kinds of questions we want people to ask after they've read Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. For him, the graphic novel format worked. And I'm glad to see that there is that trend going with that. When they are well done, like that one, they are amazingly good avenues of reaching out to readers who, again, not necessarily bad readers, but he prefers the graphic novel format, he prefers the nonfiction, and so that was the way to introduce that. Maybe sometime down the road, I'll be able to give him the original novel, and he'll read it and enjoy it. But that was the one that triggered it for him. And then I work in a small school library, very small school library, enrollment of under 200, Catholic school, pre-K to 8. And when I started donating graphic novels to the collection about 4 years ago, before I started working at the library, they started increasing circulation. By last year, Bone by Jeff Smith was out circulating everything, including the Harry Potter books, including the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, including the Percy Jackson books. It was out circulating absolutely everything. This year, Yotsubato, which is a manga series, has caught up to Bone. So those two series are out circulating everything else. I don't have solid numbers, but when I come in, I go into the library like twice a week because my partner is the one who checks out the books to the kids. And I see what's on the return cart. More than half of the books on the return cart every week are various graphic novels, whether they're nonfiction books or the manga or the graphic novels across the board. They are out circulating everything else in my school library. And it's amazing to see that. And I am getting support from the teachers. And again, here's another curriculum thing. The art teacher said she wants to work with me, and we're going to be working with the art classes on creating graphic novels, creating comic books, working with the kids.
Robin? That's another one on my list. Cat?
Okay, it's another one, an old book that is just coming back into print from Dark Horse, The Tale of One Bad Rat by Brian Talbot. That was the book when I reviewed it for Voya years and years ago. And this was back in the day before, when I had to actually send the physical books to the Voya offices in order to get the cover images put into my column. That book did not come back to me for months. And when I finally got it back, it had looked much more well-read than when I had sent it. Yeah, it went through everybody in the office. And that was a book that I was told that all the women who would never have picked up a comic book in their lives, that was the book that they read, and they said they finally understood the appeal of graphic novels. And it's always been one of my top. There's so many. You're going to ask me 5 minutes from now and I'll give you a different title, okay? But that's one I do tend to come back to again and again. It's a story of a teenage girl in London who runs away from home. Why does she have to run away from home? She's being sexually abused by her father, and her mother won't believe her. So she packs up her watercolors, she packs up her entire collection of the Beatrix Potter books, and she runs away. She ends up living in a squat for a while, and then she finally makes her way out to the Lakes District of England, where Beatrix Potter had lived, and finally finds people whom she can trust, people who start the healing process. And it's just a gorgeously done book. The colors are amazing, and the facial expressions on everybody, everything about the art just appeals completely. And at the end of the story, you find out there is a tale of the bad rat that had not been published. You know, that's how Brian Talbot does it, and he actually has the story at the end of the book.
Great.
I've been telling everybody at this conference that my favorite book of the year so far is Smile. It's true, it's true. But we've already talked about that one. Another one that it's not that well known. It comes from Oni Press. It's called Lola, A Ghost Story by Jay Torres. It's set in the Philippines. A young Filipino-American boy and his family travel back to the Philippines to visit their family. And he keeps running into this rambunctious, wild, mischievous cousin. And it turns out the cousin's a ghost. And yeah, he can see ghosts. And no one else can see the cousin. And the cousin wants him to find one special thing. Old car, toy car. He needs it. And that's the one thing that will help him finally rest in peace. And so this poor boy who has no idea what's going on starts, his cousin, his other cousin, the older sister of the dead cousin, starts telling him all these old ghost stories that his grandmother used to tell him that used to freak him out. So it's this really cool thing that kind of mixes the ghost stories with the more contemporary idea of this young boy trying to come to grips with family losses and adjusting back to the home country that he hasn't really known. And it's just really well done. And then that last panel.